Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about Unit 6, Motivation, Emotion, Personality, and Stress. Uh, we are almost done with our review videos and reviewing for this AP exam, so that's very exciting. You're almost there. So, up first, motivation is just kind of explaining that question of why we do what we do. So, a motivator is just a need or desire that energizes or directs our behavior. It's what causes us to perform certain behaviors. And different theories and different psychologists have different ideas about what drives our behavior. So, let's go through the five main ones. So, up first is the evolutionary theory, also called the instinct theory. And this one just says that we're driven by these um, kind of innate instincts that we don't have control over, just these kind of biological, pre programmed instincts that we're born with. The example of this one is with imprinting. So, geese have the instinct at birth to imprint and form an attachment with the first moving object that they see. And in this case, they form the attachment with the psychologist Conrad Lorenz. So they were motivated to follow him around due to instincts. They're, again, just pre planned uh, biological instincts that they have. This is much more suited for explaining animal behavior and not humans. So you typically wouldn't really see this applied to humans unless it's like babies with little instincts like Moro, rooting, etc. at birth. Then we have drive reduction theory. And this one is really good in explaining kind of hunger and thirst behaviors. So, kind of satisfying our biological basic needs. So, drive reduction theory says that we're motivated to perform behaviors in order to satisfy a need and maintain homeostasis or balance in our body. So, how this works is that you have a need, such as food or water. That's something that obviously is required to live and function. Um, Having this need, you need to satisfy it. So this causes a drive, like the feeling of hunger or thirst. Uh, and this is just causing you to act in a certain way so that you satisfy this need. And then this results in drive reducing behaviors such as eating or drinking. That's going to satisfy that feeling of hunger and give you the need that your body craves and is required of food and water. So again, this is really good in explaining those kind of simple, right, on Maslow's kind of physiological, biological needs, like hunger and thirst, but not much more when it comes to more complex things. Then arousal theory. This one shows up a lot, so this is a really good one to know. Arousal theory says that we're motivated to maintain our kind of optimum or just right level of arousal in between being too bored on one extreme and then being too stressed on the other. So, what optimum arousal theory says is that one, arousal is just kind of being awake, alert, active, etc., kind of just being in that just right state is where we want to be. We don't want to be too stressed, but we don't want to be too bored either. And what motivates our behaviors and causes us to do things is trying to get in that sweet spot. If we're too stressed, we're going to be motivated to decrease our arousal level and maybe do a more relaxed activity. If we're too bored, then we're going to be motivated to have more, find some stimulation or an exciting activity that's going to increase our arousal levels. What optimum arousal theory also says is that each person has their own unique optimum arousal level. So, what might be my optimum level arousal could be going for a nice hike. What yours might be is going skydiving or base jumping or something like that. What someone else's could be is just sitting at home, knitting, or watching Netflix. Uh, so each person has their own optimum level of arousal that they need to satisfy, and it's different and unique to us. So what one person might need to do to satisfy and get in that spot might be different. So if you take our roller coaster Six Flags example. Some person might be just content playing the games and that satisfies their level of arousal, whereas other people might need to go on that top thrill roller coaster, the Raging Bull, and all that stuff. The other aspect of the optimal arousal theory that we see is related to performance. And this is seen with the Yerkes-Dodson law. And what this says is, again, kind of that idea of a sweet spot or a just right level. So our best, our most optimal peak performance, whether it be, on a violin recital or a basketball game, is going to come when we're at the combination of being that perfect level between not being too chill or relaxed, but not being too stressed out so that we're going to crash and fall under the pressure. So we want that just right level where we aren't too overly aroused, but not too under aroused either. You want that sweet spot in the middle. And what it also says is that we're going to perform an easy task well with a very high level of arousal, and we're going to perform a more difficult task with a very we'll perform worse on a very difficult task with a much more high level of arousal. So you see that there's this connection between level of difficulty of a task and arousal level and how your performance is going to do. But the main thing that you need to know about the Yerkes-Dodson law is that we want to be in that middle spot for our optimal performance where we're not too stressed but not too chill. Okay, then going back here, we have incentive theory. And this is one that definitely explains a lot of our behaviors, probably most of them in my opinion. And this is to receive rewards and rewards and incentives. So this is kind of the behavioral aspect. It's not so much with punishments, more so as receiving rewards and positive incentives. So incentive theory says that we're motivated to do things that aren't just a part of our basic needs, and this is because we have incentives for them. So we're motivated to do certain behaviors in order to gain an incentive, which is just a positive or negative environmental stimulus that motivates a behavior. So we want to seek out rewards, and that's why we do behaviors. You might do something that you don't really enjoy doing, like maybe doing your chores, but that results in you getting ice cream. You might study for your AP exam in order to get a 5 and get college credit. You might, again, go to work at a job that you're not a fan of, but you do it for the incentive of money. Why did you take AP Psych? Maybe you had the incentive of college credit, making your parents happy, looking good on a resume. But maybe you also took AP Psych because you really just genuinely find it super interesting and enjoy the content area. Maybe you didn't take it for any other reward besides the sheer satisfaction you get from learning something new and interesting that you're excited about. This would be intrinsic motivation. So your motivation to do that activity comes from within and not from external rewards or punishments. So you do it whether it's playing basketball, playing the violin. You're doing these activities because you genuinely enjoy them and not because of any other external kind of motivator. Extrinsic motivation is the opposite, and we are performing a behavior in order to receive promised rewards or avoid potential punishment. So the main thing here with extrinsic motivation is that you're probably getting rewards for this behavior, and it's not you just doing it out of genuine enjoyment. So example here of extrinsic motivation is you taking AP Psych to get a 5, to put on your resume, to get college credit, to make your parents happy. All these things are extrinsic. And then what we see here is with this connection between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation comes the over-justification effect. So this happens when something that was originally intrinsically motivated, like reading originally, you take it and you then give extrinsic rewards to it. And what happens is it ultimately kind of squashes or ruins your original intrinsic motivation for that activity. So you might still do that activity because you're getting the extrinsic rewards, but you don't have that same intrinsic motivation. If you weren't getting the reward for it, you might not be doing it anymore just for sheer enjoyment of it. So my best example of this is reading. You grow up as a kid, you're intrinsically motivated to read. You just like to sit there and read books all day. And then you go to school, you're rewarded. You might get the library book club where you could get some Six Flags tickets over the summer or go to the Dells or whatever it is. You get the rewards for that, and school rewards you with things like grades. Then you see soon that you're not wanting to read for fun anymore. You lost that intrinsic motivation because you had too many extrinsic rewards tied to it. Or another example is a coach kind of ruins your passion for the game because all they care about is winning and getting that extrinsic reward of something like a medal or trophy. So originally you just enjoyed it, but when there was all this reward tied to it, you kind of lost that original motivation for that activity. Okay, then our final one is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He's one of my top favorite psychologists. So Abraham Maslow says that we're motivated to perform behaviors in order to satisfy our different needs and kind of go up this pyramid to ultimately be able to achieve self-actualization and reach that full potential that we're all capable of. And again, a really good word to know within this is self-actualization. This one comes up on the AP exam from time to time. And again, self-actualization is just reaching your full potential. And you can't do this unless all these other things are met, such as having your biological needs, having positive self-esteem, feeling like you have positive people in your life, family, friends. So to self-actualize, you need to meet all these things. And self-actualization is just reaching your full potential and being all that you can be. Abraham Maslow says that everyone can do this. Humanists are those rainbows and unicorns psychologists who says everyone can reach their full potential. You just need to meet these different things first, but everyone's capable of it. And you see this in The Sims. Thanks, Daisy, for sending me this one. The Sims, in fact, admitted that they based it off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so I have been correct this whole time. Okay, so now on to emotion. So there's 3 parts that we need to know to emotional responses. So one is physiological arousal. And knowing what physiological arousal means is really important. It's not like a term they're probably going to say, apply physiological arousal on the AP exam, but it comes up when we're talking about things like sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, and then emotional and stress responses. So physiological just means your bodily response. It's not psychological, it's physical responses of your body that are things more kind of something unconscious that you can't help. So your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your breathing, blood pressure, sweating, all of those things are part of your physiological arousal responses. So your bodily reactions. And then the second part of an emotion is your expressive behavior, whether that be making a facial expression or running away, whatever kind of behavior you're displaying. And this is often part of that fight or flight response. And then you have your conscious experience. So this is kind of your cognitive component of what you're thinking. Am I going to get hurt? So all these parts are included in how we process and interpret our emotions. Just kind of the order in which these are continuing to happen might be different depending on the theory of emotion you're looking at. So let's break down the theories of emotion. There are 5 of them. I'd say these 3 are kind of the biggies, but it's still good to know all of them. So knowing the order in which the kind of these things happen is very important. And on an FRQ, you might be asked to explain, okay, how does the James-Lange theory apply to whatever the scenario is? And you need to be able to say something like, okay, the arousal happened, then the emotion happened. So James-Lange is going to say that you experience your physiological arousal first. So you have your stimulus of something like a scary snake. Then you experience your physiological arousal reaction to it, which would be things like sweaty palms, trembling, increased heart rate, respiratory rate, etc. And then this is interpreted as fear. You notice that your palms are sweating and your heart rate's increased, and you now have interpreted this physiological arousal to mean that you're afraid. Then we have the Cannon-Bard theory. So again, Cannon-Bard, just note that arousal and emotion occur at the same time. So let's take the same stimulus of a scary snake. At the same time, you are going to have the physiological arousal of sweaty palms, increased heart rate, etc., and experience the emotion of fear. This all happens at the same time, whereas James-Lange, you had the physiological arousal, and then seeing the arousal happening on your body made you realize that you were experiencing fear. Cannon-Bard says these things happen simultaneously. So there's not really time to sit back and be like, oh, look, my palms are sweaty, boom. It's all happening at once, the emotion and the physiological arousal. Then we have Schachter 2-factor. So you need to be able to put kind of three pieces together now. So your physiological arousal and a cognitive component. So the big thing with Schachter 2-factor is that there's a cognitive interpretation and labeling that's going on. So you have your physiological arousal, and then you cognitively interpret what this means, and then you experience the emotion. So Schachter 2-factor, you need to be able to identify these different pieces. So you have your scary snake, and then you're going to experience the physiological arousal of trembling palms, sweaty, increased heart rate, respiratory rate. And then the second factor is the cognitive component. You have to think about it and label and interpret it. So you kind of stop and think, geez, what's going on here? I'm sweating, my heart rate's up. Oh, well, I feel afraid. This snake is scary. You're not thinking, oh, this snake, oh, that's really cool. I like it. I'm in love. Nice. No, you have to cognitively think, interpret, and label what you're feeling based on noticing that physiological arousal. And then this results in the overall emotional experience you feel of having that fear response. So these other ones don't have the cognitive component where you're stopping and thinking. It's all pretty automatic, just the order is different. Whereas Schachter has that little piece of stopping to think and label what you're feeling. So next one, we have the Ledoux theory that says you have two circuits in which you are kind of interpreting your emotional response. So there's two routes. You have the low road, which is actually the quick, fast one. So you have your low road, which is the kind of instinctual one. So you have your emotional stimulus. And if you take the low road, it's going to go straight to your amygdala and cause you to have that emotional response real soon. Then if it takes the high road, this would be more like the cognitive labeling piece. So it goes through more of a processing. So it doesn't go straight to the amygdala. It goes through the thalamus and then goes up to our sensory cortex to be processed and thought about. And then we have our emotional response. So here's a picture you can look at a little bit more zoomed in. All right, so here's the low road. You just see boom, boom. There you go. You interpret it. But then if you take the high road, so you can think maybe higher, it's going higher up in the brain and more thought out. So you have the stimulus, it's going in, it gets processed in the prefrontal cortex, the visual cortex, so it's much more thought out. So you can think some things might be just that initial gut reaction and it goes straight here. Other things you might have to process more. So it's saying there's kind of two routes. So it's kind of combining some of these, saying that there's sometimes that instant reaction, but other times there's more of a thoughtful reaction. There's the two routes. Okay, then we have Lazarus's cognitive appraisal theory. So another one that has that a bigger cognitive component to it. So it's saying we're appraising and judging a situation and how it's affecting us and what we should do. So Lazarus theory says that you have the cognitive appraisal. So you have an emotion-provoking stimulus of your snake. Then you have the first part of your appraisal, the primary appraisal, and you have to think, like, okay, I see the snake. Is this going to affect me personally? Like, how is this connected to me? How do I need to react? And this causes you, once you figure out what your personal connection to this is, it's going to then cause you to ask, how should I deal with this? So obviously the snake is kind of a threat to me. Now how am I going to deal with it? And then this causes you to experience fear, which kind of happens in conjunction with that physiological arousal response. So again, that cognitive component is there where you're stopping to think about what all of this means that you're experiencing. So that's the 5 theories. Again, I'd probably say they're all good to know, but typically James Lange, Cannon-Bard, Schachter two-factor are all kind of emphasized the most. Okay, now on to stress. So we know that stress is just a physical or mental response to a challenging or threatening situation. And this threatening situation is just a stressor. So a stressor is any kind of stressful stimulus or situation that's causing you to experience stress in your life. So here's some examples of things that could be potential stressors. So these are our different motivational conflicts that we could experience. And you guys are pretty good with these. I just want to encourage that you're being very, very specific in how you're applying these. So approach is making the choice between 2 attractive options. You need to be very clear in listing 2 different things that are both positive and explaining that these are 2 enjoyable, good things you're deciding between. So you can't just say, here's an example of something too general. She had to decide where to go to dinner. She had to choose which restaurant to go to. That is not going to score a point because it's not identifying 2 attractive choices. Deciding between Qdoba or Mod Pizza will score you the point because you're going to explain then, okay, these are 2 positive things that they're deciding between. Avoidance is the opposite. It's having to choose between 2 unattractive choices that you don't want to do, like doing the dishes or doing your laundry. You have to choose one, but you don't want to do either. So you need to list 2 very specific things that are both negative you don't want to do. Approach avoidance is when one goal has both an attractive and unattractive aspect to it. So an example is that you got your dream job, but you now have to move away from the love of your life. So you got a job, that's awesome, it's the one that you wanted, but it also, so that's the positive, the approach, but it also has the negative of having to move away. So it's one thing that has both a positive and a negative. Then we have the multiple or double approach avoidance. And these are kind of like the more difficult decisions that we have to make in life that are really tricky and probably cause us the most stress because there's a lot of positives and negatives to them. So, a really good example that you guys encounter is again choosing between two colleges. So, you could go to Madison. It's cool, it's in a nice city, but it's close enough but far away enough from home. So that's some positives, but maybe a negative is that it's really big and it's scary. Then you have, let's say, Marquette. Oh, cool. It's in a city. It's smaller. I like that, but it's also maybe too close to home. So each choice has both positive and negative aspects to it. So you need to be listing two different things that you're deciding between, and they both have some positives, pros, and cons to them. So when we're just a review, because we already talked about this in bio, but stress is all connected with our fight or flight response. Stress was originally that adaptive behavior that helped protect us and learn to avoid and respond to certain things. So our fight or flight response is again just that series of processes that help us or an organism struggle or escape a dangerous situation. And how it works is you have that fearful stimulus. You're going to then trigger your sympathetic nervous system, activating that fight or flight response. So you're going to end digestion, your respiratory rate's going to increase, your heart rate's going to increase to prepare for that fight or flight response. Once everything's good to go, then your sympathetic nervous system, your parasympathetic nervous system activates and calms you down. Okay, then let's go back to our friend Lazarus. So he showed up when we talked about motivation. His cognitive appraisal theory can also be applied to stress here. So an example is we said there's the primary appraisal, where you're kind of evaluating what's going on and how it's connected to you. So an example is you're evaluating the stressor that's going on and seeing like what exactly it's all about and how it's impacting you. Then what happens is the secondary appraisal, where you have to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to react. So this includes things like problem-focused coping or emotion-focused coping. So how are you going to cope with your stressor and react to it? Problem-focused coping is, again, reducing stress by changing the events that is causing us stress and kind of actively trying to reduce the stressor and do things to change it. So something maybe like you're stressed out about your vocab that you have to do for this class and all the work that you have to do, sorry. Problem-focused coping would be tackling it head on and using good time management to actually, do your work, don't procrastinate, and just power through and get it done. That would be the problem-focused coping of attacking the problem head on. Emotion-focused coping is sometimes, it's not possible. There could be a problem that, you can't actually change and solve at the moment. So you could engage in emotion-focused coping. So rather than change the stressful situation and try to get rid of it, you can respond by attending to your own emotional needs, such as, doing something like talking with others or exercising, or maybe something that's a little unhealthy, like kind of, eating too much and things like that. So that would be emotion-focused coping. You're trying to change your own emotions rather than changing the actual situation that's causing you stress. And then one thing to note with stress appraisal is that you can see here, it's all about how you're kind of cognitively interpreting your stress. So if you have your AP exam that you're studying for, or maybe the vocab packet that you're really stressed out about in this class, how you kind of encounter this is all depending on your cognitive interpretation. So if you're interpreting the AP exam as a threat and saying, yikes, this is beyond me, I hate this, I'm really stressed out, I can't do it, then it's going to cause you to be stressed and, kind of a bad sort of stress. But then if you're interpreting the AP exam as, oh, this is a challenge, I'm going to rock it, like it's tough, but like let's do it and like take it on, then it's going to cause you to kind of use that stress to kind of get you in that heightened state of arousal and being focused going into the exam. One really good kind of theory to know about stress that shows up on the AP exam before, I think it just showed up last year or the year before, is the general adaptation syndrome. So this is the 3-phase stress response that our body does. So the first stage is the alarm stage. So this stage says that we activate our fight or flight response in response to that stressful situation. So our sympathetic nervous system turns on. The hypothalamus is communicating with the endocrine system to release things like adrenaline and cortisol to get us pumping and ready to go and fighting off that stressor in the fight or flight response. So the gas pedal is activated, turned on, and you are fighting and getting ready to take that stressor head on. So then phase 2 is you've continued fighting off this stressor, and now your body begins to adapt to the stressor. So you kind of, you're still in that heightened fight or flight response. So you're in that, your body's kind of on go mode, being very stressed out and aroused, but your body's kind of getting used to the stressor now and living this kind of constant state of stress and anxiety, and you're adapting to the situation and getting used to it. So you're like this guy here. Everything's going on, you're still stressed, but you're like, what, this is fine. So you're continuing to adapt. Then we have the exhaustion phase. So what's going on is the stressor is still present, but your resources are now depleted. You've expended all your energy trying to fight off this stressor, and now your just battery is dead. And this is when you're really susceptible to illness, stress-related illnesses, because you have a weakened immune system. So you're more susceptible to heart disease, heart attacks, diabetes, etc. So being able to kind of apply these parts, how would this help or hinder you, etc., is all good. Now let's chat about personality real quick, and we're almost there. So Freud's personality theory, we have I messed this up on my trivia too, so it was bad. We have the 3 psychological selves, the id, ego, and superego that make up our personality. This is a Freudian psychoanalytic theory. The id is our innate desire. It's kind of the devil in us, the me, selfish one that's kind of pushing you to do all those kind of selfish behaviors. The ego, or the superego, is our conscious that is kind of telling us, it's based on our morals that we learn from our parents as a child, telling us what's right or wrong and to do the right thing. And then the ego is the mediator that kind of is in communication between the id and superego and tries to satisfy them both in a reasonable way. So it's kind of the reality principle. And the ego is the one that's a little bit more in our conscious. So it's us kind of consciously thinking about and trying to navigate between these 2 desires. So you can think about it like this here, that classic kind of cartoon image you see of the angel and devil on the shoulders and having to decide between the 2. Things that sometimes do also come up on the AP exam would be Freud's ego defense mechanism. So defense mechanisms are just kind of ways to protect your psychological mental ego. So sometimes we try to protect ourselves physically. This is our way to try and protect ourselves mentally. So repression is the ultimate big one. And we know that that's just trying to bury away stressful or anxiety provoking thoughts and feelings and memories and burying them and removing them from conscious awareness. So you're pushing them way down to where you can't access them anymore because they're traumatizing. You want to repress it and bury it away. Okay, so then we have our different mechanisms. These come up on the AP exam from time to time. So good to maybe just feel comfortable applying some of these. So first we have regression, and this is when you kind of take a step back to a previous stage. So think like you might have been in a more advanced psychosexual stage, and then now you're kind of taking a step back. You regressed and moved back to a more immature stage. So example, you were, into a higher psychosexual stage, and then you revert back to wetting your pants, or something like that. Reaction formation is when you're completely acting in an opposite way of your true feelings. So, an example is someone who's uncomfortable with their own sexual orientation might bully people in the LGBTQ community. Or someone who, maybe a mother who really dislikes her daughter and is resentful towards her, will shower her with love and affection because she's kind of acting an exact opposite of the way she actually feels about her daughter. Projection is when you're kind of attributing your own objectionable or bad feelings or actions and behaviors to another person. So, for example, you're a cheater and you're cheating on your husband, but now you're going to accuse him of being the one who's cheating. Or you are kind of a gossiper or something like that. You complain that other people are gossiping and causing drama when it's really you who's doing it. Rationalization. So this is when you're using self-deception to kind of justify an unacceptable behavior. So an example of this is you cheated on a test and you did it because everyone else is doing it. So you kind of rationalized and tried to form an acceptable reason or justification for your poor behavior. Displacement is when you're shifting your kind of bad, aggressive impulses and putting them into like a safer outlet. Say your boss was mean to you. You don't want to take it out on your boss because you know that would end poorly. So you're going to take out your stress on kind of like a safer or more weaker individual, like maybe your little sibling, your dog, even your wife at home, or anything like that. So you're kind of taking it out on someone else that isn't the source of the problem, especially when they're kind of lower on the totem pole when it comes to power. Then sublimation. So sublimation is when there's kind of forbidden impulses that are probably not good to have, and you are able to divert these into socially desirable goals. So an example of someone who's really aggressive is Regina George. Then she's able to channel her aggression into the lacrosse team. Or the kid who's like really into dissecting animals and stuff could channel his energies into becoming a doctor and like performing surgery or something like that. Finally, we have denial, and this is just when you completely refuse to accept the reality of what's going on. So maybe you have a drinking problem or something like that, but you just completely refuse to accept that you actually have a problem and don't believe it's there. Okay. Then on to our humanistic theories of personality. Remember, humanism is all about the rainbows and unicorns perspective. So they really believe in each person and that everyone can kind of be a good person if they have their needs met. So we talked about Maslow already, and then Carl Rogers. His big contributions are person-centered therapy, in which you can grow and be a good person if you have things like that unconditional positive regard, where you're always going to care and support that person no matter what. It's kind of that judgment-free zone mentality. So parents should provide this to their children, and therapists should be providing this to their clients as well. An important concept that he brings up, self-esteem, yeah, but the main thing is self-efficacy. This is one that comes up on the AP exam a lot, and it's one sense of competence and effectiveness. So being able to confidently do skills and tasks. So self-efficacy isn't really if you're talented at this, it's your belief in whether or not you can do it. So if you have high self-efficacy in the area of cooking, you feel confident in your ability to go into a kitchen and be able to make a meal. If you have high self-efficacy in public speaking, you are very confident in your abilities to go ahead and perform a speech and give that in front of a bunch of people. So self-efficacy is just kind of your belief in yourself and your different abilities. So this is one that comes up a lot when we're talking about like help or hinder type questions on an FRQ. Then finally, we have COSTA's Big 5 factors. And remember that with the OCEAN acronym. These ones come up on the AP exam often as well, often in kind of that help hinder mentality. So we have openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So openness to experience, if you score high on this, you're very creative, imaginative, original. But if you're low scoring, you're someone who's maybe a little more stick to the rules, more conventional, and not so curious. So openness is more than just open-minded. It's also being kind of creative as well. Conscientiousness is that hardworking, diligent, punctual. You're a really good student, really good person to be in that group project with. If you are low scoring on that, you're more likely disorganized, lazy. You don't really have a lot of ambition when it's coming to your schoolwork. Extroversion is being outgoing, talkative, and extrovert. Opposite would be being an introvert if you're low scoring. So you're more quiet and reserved. Agreeableness would be kind of, how easy are you to connect to as a person and just kind of work with. So trusting, warm, being just a good-natured individual. If you're low scoring, you might be kind of difficult to work with. You might be kind of irritable, cold, aloof, that kind of a thing. Neuroticism. This is kind of if you're neurotic, you are much more anxious and your emotions are kind of flowing. You don't really have good control over your emotional responses. So you're kind of worried, kind of all over the place. If you're low scoring, you're more even-tempered, calm, and mellow, and secure in kind of your emotional responses. Okay, then we have Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. Bandura and anything related to him is really good to know because he's coming up so often. So he's a good psychologist to know. He has his observational social learning theory with modeling. He has this here, so he's a good one to know. So what reciprocal determinism is saying is that our personality is shaped by an kind of continual interaction of behavior, internal cognitive processes, and our environment. So my example that I gave here is you have something like your personal cognitive thoughts. So you might think, I like soccer, it's fun. Then this influences you to, go to a certain social environment. Because you like soccer, you're spending more time at the gym, and now you're in this social environment of being at the gym. Being at the gym and spending more time there causes you to change your behavior and start spending more time with the athletes you meet there. And then spending more time with the athletes you meet there is going to cause you to continue thinking that soccer's fun. So you're this is all at play at once, and you're continually cognitive, environment, behavior, all these things are constantly influencing and changing one another. So being able to apply this to a scenario and an FRQ and breaking it down in these three kind of categories influencing one another is good. Okay, then, this is my favorite. We have Rotter's locus of control theory. So there's the two kind of types of locus of control that you have. If you're someone with an internal locus of control, you really believe that you are in charge of your destiny, and what you do, the work you put in, is going to result in your success or failure. So this can help you in that you're going to really take ownership of what you're doing, and it's going to help you study and be motivated to get your work done and study for that AP exam, because you know that if you do put in the work, it's going to produce good results. And you also know that if you don't put in the work, it's going to result in bad things, and that's on you. External locus of control. You don't believe that you have control over your destiny. You think external factors like luck or chance are influencing those. You think that even if you're trying hard, sometimes it still doesn't matter because there's other things at play in the universe. So this is an example of something that would hinder you because you're not going to be motivated to study for your big AP exam because you think, you know what, it's out of my control anyway. No matter how hard I study, I'm just not going to do well. I can't help it. So it's going to cause you not to be motivated to study if you don't see it as, mattering anyway, if things are just up to luck or chance. That is that for this review video. Go through, apply these, and think about how they can help and hinder you in different situations with a lot of these terms. Rock on. Good luck, you guys. Only one more unit to review after this.